African is dealing with the African world over dealing with with a terrible contradiction. The same people who taught you that faith and who gave you that image of God use the same religion and the same image to justify slavery.
Henrik Clarke, born January 1, 1915, Union Springs, Alabama, is historian, author, lecturer, professor emeritus at Hunter College, and known to the world as African Griot. Welcome to Personal Diary, Professor. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Why did you decide to teach the history of African peoples in Africa as well as in the diaspora?
Well, hanging around my great-grandmother, who was very religious and reading pages from the Bible and the illustrated Sunday school lessons, I could never see any picture in the Bible or the Sunday school lesson that looked like my own people. Then, as I grew up and I wanted to make a search, and I asked the white man that I was working for, I still remember his name, Gagstider. He was a lawyer in Columbus, Georgia, that I wanted a book on the ancient history of African people. And he told me, and not impolitely, but with great, patience, I'm sorry, John, you came from a people who have no history. And then later, doing chores at a Rosenwald High School in Columbus, Georgia, I encountered a book called The New Negro, because then I opened it to an essay by a Puerto Rican of African descent, Arthur Schomburg. And his essay was The Negro Digs Up His Past. And for the first time, I read an article showing that African people were older than European people, one of the oldest people in the world. They were the forerunners of civilization. They were older than slavery, and they had built nations, and they had destroyed nations. They had done everything that people do in the world, and they had helped to lay the basis for the literature and the social thought pattern that went into the making of the Bible.
How old were you when you discovered this?
Oh, a little over 10.
10 years old?
A little over 10. And then I wanted to do something to impress my 5th grade teacher, one of the 3 female deities in my life. So I wanted to deliver a lecture on the African people in world history, and I began to look. And after the essay, I was sure that I came from a people who had a noble history and who had played every role in the human drama from saint to buffoon, and that we need to look at them as such they were.
I want to ask you what we learned from our history, but we're trying to stay focused on you, and it's hard to separate you from our history because you seem one and the same. But you mentioned your 5th grade teacher was one of your female deities?
Yes.
Why? And who were the other 2?
My great-grandmother, who taught me about the horrors of slavery and the selling of her first husband, Buck, to a slave breeding farm in Virginia. And after emancipation, she roamed over Virginia for 3 years trying to find him. Of course, she never did.
What was her name?
Mary. We call her Mom Mary. And
she touched you?
She believed in me, and she wouldn't let anyone punish me.
It's a wonderful grandmother.
Anytime I did something bad, and I was always into something, she said, send the boy to me.
Who was the second deity?
Well, the second deity was my mother,
What was her name?
Will Ella Mays, the same family as Willie Mays. And according to my information, Willie Mays is her youngest brother's child.
And your fifth grade teacher, Mrs.
Miss Evelina Taylor, who taught me to believe in myself and told me that I will never let you be anything less than your best self.
What was it like growing up, going to school? Because while you were born in Union Springs, Georgia, you didn't grow up
Springs,
there.
Alabama.
I'm sorry, you're Union Springs, Alabama. You didn't grow up there.
Well, my father was a farmer, and after a storm and the damage to our house, my father thought he would move to Columbus and make enough money to go back and buy the land. We were sharecroppers, landless peasants.
What was he like?
He was a man brooding, but not consistently. He was not a dull man. He was an ambitious man. He loved his children. And
what was it like for you when you first went north?
First went north was a great revelation. I was 18 years old. I came straight to Harlem, clean streets and an exciting community, and I become very active in National League of Negro Youth and the Harlem Y, and especially the old Harlem History Club that met in the Harlem Y. I did whatever jobs I could get, and, you know, and a salad man in restaurants, which is one of the highest I got, and dishwasher, and worked in hotels and bellhop at night. I always worked.
What was your most favorite job before teaching?
Oh, I had all jobs were means of survival until I could get to teaching. I worked in a non-executive capacity at NBC for 6 years. I left in '58. It was a job called house manager. I was a glorified supervisor of the maintenance crew.
But you did a little bit more than that later years at CBS.
Well, at CBS, I was a coordinator of the CBS series Black Heritage, the Story of Black America.
How did that come about?
It came about because CBS was told that if you don't have more black programs, your license is going to be in danger. They did not know that I knew this was the case.
What year was this?
Well, it began to develop around '66, and most of the programs went on '68. It was the longest television program on the history of black people.
Did you draw from any of your writings and your studies of Harlem? Because during the time you were in Harlem, you wrote a great deal.
I've done 3 books on Harlem. Harlem, a Community in Transition, Harlem, USA, Harlem, Voices from the Soul of Black America.
Transition interests me. What period was this that you were in Harlem that you wrote about the transition?
When I say transition, I'm writing about the whole community. I'm writing about the community in the process of change. I'm writing about the early career of Adam Powell, the politicians before Adam Powell, the Father Divine movement in Harlem, and the fact that Harlem was the proving ground of great black movements. He lived in Harlem for a number of years, but W.E.B. Du Bois traveled a great deal. Remember when W.E.B. Du Bois edited the Crisis magazine for the NACP, he lived in Harlem.
You met him?
About 6 times in my life, and because of my memory and my understanding of history and historical events and treatises other than black history, because knowing our history is not enough. To sharpen your focus on our history, you have to have some knowledge of world history. Because of that, W.B. Du Bois could not believe that in formal education, I was really a grammar school dropout who read more books than most men see in a lifetime and could remember what I read and could interpret what I read. So he always says, son, are you sure you're not a Morehouse man? You sure you're not kidding me?
And what would you say?
I said, no, Dr. Du Bois, I just read it and analyzed, went to a whole lot of lectures, and I went to college on high school equivalency under the GI Bill of Rights after I came out of the Army. Prior to that, I not only had not gone to college, I had not gone to high school.
So you went right from grammar school? Is that what you're saying?
I missed one semester in grammar school.
And then you went to...
And I you know, then I started working in Columbus. You understand, this is the beginning of the Depression. When I left the South at the beginning of the Depression, and depressions come early and stay late in black communities. So we get depressions before white people get depressions.
What was that time like for you, other than being doing without?
And yet poor. It was a great adventure because I read my reading, and sometimes the gamblers would take me around and bet on my memory, and says, I bet you this boy can tell you how many ships in the Japanese Navy. Oh, put your money down.
How do you do on baseball and scores and
not at
ERAs?
All. Not at all. But you see, what they did not know is that when I worked for white people, when they threw away the almanacs, I would read the almanacs and memorize these facts. And then my information was always a year old.